The golden hues of the setting sun gently embraced the suburban neighborhood, casting a warm and inviting glow as I eased my car into the familiar embrace of our driveway. A sigh of relief escaped my lips as I shut off the engine, the weight of the day's toil gradually lifting from my shoulders. Despite the weariness that lingered, the mere thought of reuniting with my beloved wife Amy infused me with a renewed sense of energy. Amy and I had journeyed through 5 blissful years of marriage, each day witnessing the blossoming of our love. Yet, amidst the warmth of our union, a lingering cloud of unease loomed, born from a series of unsettling incidents involving her previous bosses. It was a nagging feeling, a gut instinct that whispered of something inherently wrong in the way these men had treated her. However, today, as I made my way home, there flickered within me a glimmer of hope, albeit cautious. Amy had embarked on a new job, and her new boss, Mike Armstrong, was slated to join us for dinner. I desperately wanted to believe that this time would be different, that Amy had finally found a boss who would respect her boundaries and honor her with the dignity she deserved. With a bouquet of deep crimson roses cradled delicately in my hand, Amy's favorite, I ascended the steps to our front door. The petals, soft and velvety to the touch, held the promise of bringing a radiant smile to her face. The scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the evening air, mingling with the anticipation that danced in my veins as I reached for the familiar doorknob. A wave of eager anticipation washed over me as the door creaked open, revealing the warm embrace of our home. There she stood, framed in the gentle light, a vision of joy and love incarnate. Amy's eyes sparkled with genuine happiness as she enveloped me in her arms, her fiery red hair cascading like molten gold down her shoulders. Her radiant smile, a beacon of warmth, illuminated the room as she greeted me with open arms. "Ron!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with the melody of happiness. "You're home early. I missed you so much today." Returning her embrace, I savoured the comforting warmth of her presence, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against mine, echoing a familiar refrain of love and longing. "I missed you too, Amy," I whispered into her ear, my voice imbued with the depth of affection that only she could elicit. "I've got a little surprise for you." Amy's eyes widened with curiosity as I presented her with the bouquet of crimson roses. With delicate grace, she accepted them, her fingers brushing tenderly over the petals. "Oh, Ron, they're beautiful," she exclaimed, her face alight with joy. "Thank you so much. I love them." With our embrace lingering, a sense of optimism washed over me like a gentle tide. Perhaps this dinner with Mike Armstrong would indeed mark a turning point in our lives, a chance to leave behind the shadows of the past and step into a brighter, more hopeful future. As we stepped into the worn ambience of our living room, the soft lighting and plush furniture served as a stark contrast to the knot of tension that coiled within me. Amy and I had anticipated a quiet, intimate dinner at home, but something about the evening felt off-kilter. It wasn't just the unsettling incidents involving Amy's previous bosses that gnawed at my mind. It was the palpable sense of unease that seemed to permeate the very walls of our home. With the bouquet of crimson roses still in hand, I was taken aback by an unexpected sight as I entered the living room. Standing in the centre of the room was Mike Armstrong, a crystal wineglass in hand and a self-assured smile adorning his features. His presence, though seemingly innocuous, stirred a disquiet within me, a sense of unease that refused to be ignored. "Ron, my man," Mike exclaimed, his voice laced with an unsettling familiarity as he extended his hand toward me. Despite the veneer of cordiality, there was something about his demeanour that didn't sit well with me, a subtle undercurrent of arrogance that set my senses on edge. And so, with a reluctance that weighed heavy upon me, I extended my hand to meet Mike's in a handshake that felt more like a reluctant concession than a genuine greeting. I hope you don't mind me coming over early, Mike chimed, his words carrying a casual tone that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. As I stole a glance at Amy, I could see the surprise etched across her features, a fleeting expression quickly veiled behind a forced smile. Her attempt to conceal her discomfort was evident, though her eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety that mirrored my own unease. "Mike," she managed, her voice strained with a veneer of politeness. "I didn't expect you to be here so soon." Mike's grin widened as he casually placed his wineglass upon a nearby table, his demeanor exuding an air of self-assuredness that grated against my growing apprehension. "I'm a man who likes to be punctual, Amy," he replied, his eyes never wavering from her form. "I hope you don't mind if I help myself to a glass of wine." An uncertain glance exchanged between Amy and myself preceded my response, a forced politeness coating my words as I offered, "Of course, Mike, make yourself at home." Yet, even as we settled onto the couch, the weight of Mike's presence loomed large, casting a palpable tension that hung thick in the air. Despite my efforts to engage in small talk, Mike seemed intent on maintaining an aura of authority that stifled any attempts at easing the atmosphere. His gaze remained fixated on Amy, his proximity to her sending a ripple of discomfort coursing through me. "Ron," he finally addressed me, his words tinged with a veiled insinuation. "I have to say, you're a lucky man to have such a beautiful wife." My forced smile faltered as I acknowledged his words, my unease mounting with each passing moment. Yet it was Amy's discomfort that cut through the tension like a knife, her voice tinged with unease as she attempted to diffuse the growing awkwardness. "Mike, please," she implored, her eyes darting between us. "Let's not make this evening awkward." But Mike remained unfazed, his self-assured grin never faltering as he dismissed her plea with a casual remark. "Awkward, Amy? I don't think so," he retorted, his tone laced with a hint of mockery. "I believe in being honest and straightforward. In fact, I have something to discuss with you both later." The ominous undertone of his words sent a chill coursing down my spine, a silent exchange of worried glances passing between Amy and myself. Whatever Mike had in mind, it was clear that the evening was about to take a turn for the worse. Summoning every ounce of courage I could muster, I cleared my throat, addressing Mike with a cautious tone. "You mentioned there was something you wanted to discuss with us, Mike," I began, my voice betraying a hint of trepidation. Mike leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass with deliberate care, his eyes locked onto mine with an unsettling intensity. "Indeed, Ron," he replied, his voice dripping with a confidence that sent shivers down my spine. "I have a proposition for both of you." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, each syllable like a hammer blow against the fragile semblance of normalcy we had tried to maintain. And then, with a blunt declaration that cut through the silence like a knife, Mike laid bare his proposition, leaving us stunned and speechless. Leaning in closer, Mike's gaze bore into mine with a predatory intensity, his voice dripping with a disturbingly seductive tone. "Ron," he purred, his words laced with a sinister allure, "I think you underestimate the thrill of it. Imagine the passion, the intensity. It would be an experience you'd never forget." Before I could respond, Amy interjected, her voice trembling with indignation. "Mike, this is absolutely inappropriate and disrespectful to both of us. How could you even suggest such a thing?" Mike's arrogance seemed to swell with each passing moment, as if he revelled in our discomfort. "Amy, my dear," he retorted, his tone patronizing, "I believe in pushing boundaries and exploring new horizons. I'm offering you both an opportunity to spice up your marriage." Fists clenched tightly, I struggled to contain my anger. My voice strained as I addressed him. "Mike, you need to leave now." As he leaned back in his chair, his smirk remained unyielding. "Think about it, Ron," he taunted, rising from his seat and making his way toward the door. "I'll be waiting for your answer." With Mike's departure, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate, leaving Amy and me in stunned silence. "I can't believe he would even suggest such a thing," Amy finally exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Taking her hand in mine, I offered what little comfort I could muster. "We won't let him get away with this, Amy. We'll find a way to handle this situation together." As the night wore on, simmering anger began to replace the initial shock, and I knew I had to confront Mike. Excusing myself from the living room, I retreated to my man cave, a dimly lit sanctuary adorned with my collection of military memorabilia and knives. Taking a deep breath, I decided to reveal my military background to Mike, a part of my past I had rarely shared with anyone. Returning to the living room, my demeanor transformed, the unease replaced with a steely resolve. "Mike," I began, locking eyes with him, "I need you to understand something. I'm very protective of Amy, and you've crossed a line tonight that I won't stand for." Mike's facade of innocence faltered, a flicker of unease passing over his face. "Is that so, Ron?" he replied, attempting to mask his discomfort. "What are you trying to say?" Gesturing toward the collection of knives in my man cave, each blade gleaming with a deadly edge, I continued, "I have a passion for knives, Mike. I know how to use them. And if you ever threaten my marriage again, if you ever come near Amy with such intentions, well, let's just say I'm not afraid to get up close and personal." The implicit threat hung heavy in the air, and Mike's bravado began to crumble. With a nod, he rose from the couch, his earlier confidence replaced by unease, as he made his way to the front door. Closing the door behind him, a small sense of satisfaction washed over me. While the battle was far from over, I was determined to protect our marriage at all costs, even if it meant confronting threats head-on. The tension in our home lingered like an unwelcome guest, but together, Amy and I would weather the storm. In the aftermath of Mike Armstrong's shocking proposition, Amy and I were left to grapple with the disturbing revelation, our dinner plans derailed and our home filled with an oppressive silence. Seated at the dining table, our plates of untouched food grew cold, symbolic of the chilling effect of Mike's words that hung heavy in the air. Despite the weight of the situation, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the recording device hidden in my pocket, a silent witness to Mike's transgressions. Breaking the silence, Amy's voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Ron, I can't believe he had the audacity to say something like that. It's disgusting." Reaching across the table, I placed a reassuring hand on hers, offering what little comfort I could muster. "I know, Amy. What he did was completely unacceptable. We'll figure out how to handle this together." As the gravity of the situation settled upon us, I decided it was time to reveal the evidence we held against Mike. Retrieving the recording device from my pocket, I placed it on the table before us. "Amy," I said, my voice steady, "I recorded our conversation with Mike. I wanted to make sure we had evidence of what he said." Amy's eyes widened as she looked at the small device. "You recorded it?" she asked, her disbelief evident. I nodded solemnly. "Yes, it's our insurance, Amy. In case we need it." Pressing the play button, the unsettling proposition filled the room once more, Amy's face contorting with a mixture of anger and disgust as she listened. "How could he say such things?" she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Drawing closer to her, my heart aching for my wife, I affirmed, "We can't let him get away with this. We need to confront him and make sure he knows the consequences of his actions." Amy nodded in agreement, her resolve strengthening. "You're right, Ron. He needs to be held accountable for what he's done." With our determination renewed, we pushed aside our half-eaten dinners and began to strategize. We needed a plan to confront Mike and ensure that he faced the repercussions of his inappropriate behavior. In the days that followed, our home felt like a battleground, our marriage under siege from the unsettling proposition Mike had made. Yet, armed with the evidence we had gathered, we were determined to confront him. Utilizing my military background, I delved into research, uncovering disturbing truths about Mike's past and his involvement with the Marriage Mutual Insurance Society. Sharing my findings with Amy, we realized that confronting Mike directly might not be enough. We needed to expose his behavior and ensure that he faced the consequences he had managed to evade in the past. As we rehearsed the conversation we would have with Mike, the tension in our home reached a fever pitch. Finally, the night arrived for our confrontation. As Mike walked through our front door, his confident facade betrayed no hint of the turmoil within. Seated in the living room, we laid bare the evidence we had gathered, confronting him with the truth of his actions. As the recording played, Mike's demeanor shifted from arrogance to fear, his attempts to feign innocence crumbling in the face of undeniable proof. With a mix of anger and determination, Amy and I made it clear that his actions would no longer go unchecked. "Mike," Amy asserted, her voice firm, "you need to understand that your actions have consequences." With the weight of our evidence bearing down on him, Mike's bravado dissolved into a fearful silence, his once confident demeanor shattered by the reality of his transgressions. It was a pivotal moment, marking the beginning of the end for Mike Armstrong's reign of manipulation and abuse. "We won't let you continue to hurt others," I reiterated, leaning in closer with unwavering resolve. "Mike, we could expose your behavior to your workplace, your friends, and your family. We could ensure that everyone knows the truth about who you really are." Mike's eyes darted around the room, his once confident demeanor shattered by the weight of our words. He seemed to realize the gravity of the situation he now found himself in. "What do you want from me?" he finally managed to utter, his voice. Sharing my findings with Amy, we realized that confronting Mike directly might not be enough. We needed to expose his behavior and ensure that he faced the consequences he had managed to evade in the past. As we rehearsed the conversation we would have with Mike, the tension in our home reached a fever pitch. Finally, the night arrived for our confrontation. As Mike walked through our front door, his confident facade betrayed no hint of the turmoil within. Seated in the living room, we laid bare the evidence we had gathered, confronting him with the truth of his actions. As the recording played, Mike's demeanor shifted from arrogance to fear, his attempts to feign innocence crumbling in the face of undeniable proof. With a mix of anger and determination, Amy and I made it clear that his actions would no longer go unchecked. "Mike," Amy asserted, her voice firm, "you need to understand that your actions have consequences." With the weight of our evidence bearing down on him, Mike's bravado dissolved into a fearful silence, his once confident demeanor shattered by the reality of his transgressions. It was a pivotal moment, marking the beginning of the end for Mike Armstrong's reign of manipulation and abuse. "We won't let you continue to hurt others," I reiterated, leaning in closer with unwavering resolve. "Mike, we could expose your behavior to your workplace, your friends, and your family. We could ensure that everyone knows the truth about who you really are." Mike's eyes darted around the room, his once confident demeanor shattered by the weight of our words. He seemed to realize the gravity of the situation he now found himself in. "What do you want from me?" he finally managed to utter, his voice laced with desperation. Amy spoke next, her tone resolute. "We want you to promise that you'll change your ways, that you'll never again use your position to exploit or manipulate others." I added, emphasizing our point, "And if we ever hear of you causing harm to anyone else, we won't hesitate to expose your actions." You'll face the consequences you've so far avoided. Mike, now thoroughly humiliated and fearful, nodded frantically. I promise I'll change. I'll never do this again. Please, just don't ruin my life. With our point made and Mike thoroughly shaken, Amy and I felt a sense of resolution wash over us. We had confronted him, exposed his behaviour, and ensured that he faced the fear of consequences. As he left our home that evening, his confidence replaced by fear, we couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction in closure. Our marriage, once threatened by the shadow of Amy's past bosses, had emerged stronger than ever. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged into the light, ready to move forward with the knowledge that we could protect our love and the well-being of others from those who sought to harm it.